U.S. President Barack Obama prepares to focus on his domestic accomplishments in his upcoming State of the Union address. A new study sheds light on lowering risks of type 1 diabetes and extending lives. And an army of tiny robots gets down in Tokyo. Africa 54 starts right now.
Hello and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. Voters in Zambia are casting ballots Tuesday in an election to replace the late President Michael Sata, who died in October. 11 candidates are on the ballot. The top contenders are Defense Minister Edgar Lungu of Mr. Sata's Patriotic Party Front and Hakainde Hichilema, who heads the opposition United Party for National Development. The winner will serve the remaining year and a half of the 5-year term Mr. Sata earned when he was elected president in 2011. An election for a fresh presidential term is scheduled for next year. Well, a third of Zambia's 15 million people are eligible to participate in Tuesday's special vote. For the latest, we are joined via live Skype by reporter Gillian Parker from Lusaka, Zambia. Gillian, first, just give us a sense of how this process was from morning until this time when it's almost over.
Well, I've been looking and visiting several polling booths across the capital, Lusaka, and I can tell you that the election has gone very peacefully so far. There have been heavy rains, which might have put off a few people from voting, but it's more likely that it's actually going to end up delaying the voting process more than anything else.
Now, we know that the field is pretty crowded, but two candidates obviously stand out. Is that what you're hearing from those casting their votes, those who had already cast their votes, that probably the president will come from one of the two?
Yes, I think so. I think speaking to most people voting today and analysts across the country, this does seem to be a two-horse race between Edgar Lungu, who's with the Patriotic Front, the ruling party, and Hakainde Hichilema with the United Party for National Development. So really, we are expecting it to be a tussle between these two candidates, even though there are 9 other candidates on for votes.
Yeah. What are the major issues that separate and distinguish these two candidates, particularly?
Edgar Lungu, with the ruling Patriotic Front, is following a very populist campaign and following in the footsteps of Sata, who died in October last year. So really he's promising very big infrastructure projects, employment, higher wages, and this kind of thing. So it's very much kind of appealing to the grassroots voters. Hichilema is, he's called an elite, but he is an extremely successful businessman and a farmer, and that does appeal to some people who feel they've been, especially farmers in the country, who feel they've been let down by the government. Yeah. So it's a tight race.
Yeah. Now, we know that whoever wins is going to serve just a year and a half, and then we'll have a fresh election. But how significant will this be to whoever wins this election?
This is going to be fairly significant, although it isn't going to be an easy 18 months. The copper price, copper is the mainstay industry in Zambia, and the copper price has just plummeted to the lowest levels in 6 years. So they're going to be quite worried about that, and they're going to have to really think about ways to protect the economy.
Well, Gillian, thank you very much for your reporting there. Reporter Gillian Parker reporting live via Skype from Lusaka, Zambia. All the way to West Africa, Cameroon's army has freed 30 of some 80 hostages kidnapped during a cross-border attack by suspected Boko Haram Islamist fighters. Following the attack on a village in the northern region of the country, at least 4 people were killed and around 80 houses burned. Cameroon's Communications Minister Issa Chirono Bakari said the kidnapping is one of the largest abductions on the Cameroonian soil. Many children were among the hostages. Boko Haram, which has killed thousands and kidnapped hundreds in northern Nigeria, has also targeted Cameroon and Niger over the past year as it seeks to expand its zone of operations. Now, with its popularity ratings starting to improve as a result of an improving economy and low unemployment, U.S. President Barack Obama is preparing to focus on his domestic accomplishments in his upcoming State of the Union address. But analysts say the recent terrorist attacks in Paris and Americans' uneasiness about threats by extremists will be reason for him to speak about his foreign policy too. VOA White House correspondent Luis Ramirez reports.
In the days before the annual address, President Obama has been highlighting his domestic successes, flying around the United States, and in a largely unprecedented move, giving previews of the announcements he will make in the areas of jobs, housing, cybersecurity, and education. But the terrorist attacks in France are a sobering reminder for the president that the fight against extremists is far from over and remains at the top of his global agenda.
In the streets of Paris, the world's seen once again what terrorists stand for. They have nothing to offer but hatred and human suffering. And we stand for freedom and hope and the dignity of all human beings. And that's what the city of Paris represents to the world. And that spirit will endure forever, long after the scourge of terrorism is banished from this world.
Mr. Obama in 2014 launched a bombing campaign and sent in U.S. troops to help combat Islamic State militants. But that fight, he has said, will take years. The legacy he will want to talk about is more likely to be his effort for a deal to prevent Iran from having nuclear weapons. Analyst Larry Korb, who served as Mr. Obama's campaign foreign policy advisor, says the president sees more reason to focus on domestic issues than global matters.
He'll talk about, those issues, but I think he's recognized that, we got to get strong at home before we can be strong in the world.
Relations with Russia have been at a low point since the invasion of Ukraine, but do not expect too much focus on what the administration is finding to be an especially complex relationship. That became apparent Wednesday when the Russians assisted U.S. astronauts during an emergency aboard the International Space Station.
Everybody's upset about the Russians in Ukraine. Who saved our astronauts today? Up in space? The Russians. Okay, so we need the Russians. They helped us get stuff in and out of Afghanistan. So yeah, you're not happy with them, in Ukraine. So it's not like, gee, we ought to have a strategy that's anti-Russian. No. We need the Russians, and we worked with them in a couple of areas.
Among the foreign policy successes for Mr. Obama to highlight, a landmark climate change deal with China and the deployment of hundreds of U.S. troops to fight Ebola in West Africa. Luis Ramirez, VOA News at the White House.
From lowering unemployment to boosting manufacturing, President Barack Obama is expected to tout gains in the U.S. economy during his State of the Union address on January 20th. The president also has called for increased American innovation to help grow the middle class and help the United States compete globally. VOA White House correspondent Arul Pandey visited one company outside Washington that is exporting its products to countries like China while offering competitive wages to its workers.
There's this Chinese shipping clerk in Shanghai that's going to open this box right here, and I'm really proud of that.
When Drew Greenblatt bought Marlin Steel Wire Products in 1998, the workers were paid minimum wage and bent steel by hand to form wire baskets to hold bread. Fast forward 17 years, and Marlin Steel's nearly 30 workers now use American steel and million-dollar robotic machinery to manufacture products exported overseas while being paid a competitive wage with full benefits and performance incentives.
That's how we differentiate from China. It's not by having lower paid employees. It's by having the best innovations, the smartest ideas, and then having talent to actually create those ideas.
This idea was echoed by President Obama on January 9th when he and Vice President Joe Biden toured a polymer factory in Tennessee. The president highlighted the gains in manufacturing, with 786,000 jobs added in the last 58 months, and announced a new hub that would bring the government, companies, and colleges together to create more high-tech manufacturing opportunities.
We've got the most dynamic economy in the world, and we've got the best business people in the world and the best universities in the world. Let's put them all together and make sure they're working to create more good jobs and more opportunity for the American people.
Back at Marlin Steel in Baltimore, the innovation is driven by a team of mechanical engineers who design sheet metal fabrications for companies like the German engineering firm Bosch and Japan's Toyota automaker. Workers like Iraq War veteran Brent Fox make these ideas a reality. Fox has moved from line worker to team leader after learning new skills on the job, and says he marvels at how the small wire product company is able to compete against its foreign counterparts.
Working and living in a global economy, it's pretty impressive that places like this still exist in America when it's so much easier to just go buy it overseas and have it shipped.
As for Greenblatt, he says with more trade deals, a better tax structure, and greater protections for intellectual property, American companies like his can contribute to growing the U.S. middle class and helping the economy surge.
Mark my words, the American manufacturing renaissance is here and it's about to really blossom.
Greenblatt says Marlin Steel is already adding more factory space to bring in more technology and hire more engineers. Arup Pandey, VOA News, Baltimore, Maryland.
Well, be sure to join Voice of America for complete live coverage of President Barack Obama's State of the Union address and the Republican response on Wednesday, January 21st, beginning at 01:30 UTC. The program will be a television, radio, and web simulcast. That's Wednesday, January 21st, beginning at 01:30 UTC. Now, after the attack on the kosher market in Paris early this month, many members of the country's Jewish population, the largest in Europe, are more anxious about their safety and their future. VOA's Al Pearson reports from the French capital.
For days after the attack, Jews and non-Jews came to the eastern edge of Paris to pay their respects.
My heart goes out to those who fell for liberty, for France. I'm a Christian, but all people are equal, all the same, and we should have freedom for all.
But many of France's Jews are not feeling particularly free in the wake of the attack. This young couple came to mourn a friend who was killed in the market.
Now, after what happened, unfortunately there's a feeling of wanting to escape. We don't want to leave, but sometimes we feel like we have to flee to protect ourselves.
Raphael says he's not sure whether France's diverse communities can live together in peace anymore. His wife, Malka, doesn't want to leave France, but fears she may have to.
This is my country, I love it, but above all, I love my religion. Why should we have to be constantly in fear and hide our skullcaps and Jewish stars in the metro so we're not attacked? This is not a life.
But that's not a universal view, in spite of previous attacks in France and Belgium and numerous anti-Semitic incidents in Europe every year.
You don't have to be scary. We have a good security over here, and I don't think that is going to be worse than before.
I don't want to live in. I don't want to stand here because I'm French, I'm Jordan, but I'm French.
Still, the Paris attack is expected to fuel another increase in Jewish emigration from France to Israel after it already doubled last year to 7,000. That's just over 1% of France's Jewish community, but it will take more than police and army deployments to give French Jews more long-term security, says Jonathan Arfi, vice president of the Council of Jewish Institutions in France.
We have to think about maybe reinventing the French society in order to struggle against this radicalization, because if we do not fight now against this radicalization, we are condemned to suffer from new attacks in the years to come.
Arfi says the Solidarity March after the attacks could help spur action, but it may not come soon enough for Raphael and Malka.
I never thought it would be like this. Now that I'm talking to you, I don't believe it's true. I think that tomorrow I'm just going to wake up, pass my exams, and live my normal life, forgetting that a friend of ours is dead.
Malka is not likely to forget, but the concern is that the urgency created by the attacks won't last long enough to result in the changes she and other French Jews want to see. Al Pessin, VOA News, Paris.
We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. And check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, a new study reveals a simple way for type 1 diabetics to live longer lives. Stay with us.
Hamilton Live is a live audience performance. With live music, you have that interaction. There's nothing like getting that immediate feedback from the folks that you're performing to. They feel it and they respond back to you. You see it in their eyes. You know that you're connecting with them. Like if any form of communication, it's that response that you get back.
Welcome back. People with type 1 diabetes are most likely to have an early death and suffer severe long-term complications than the rest of the population. A new study looks at whether maintaining tighter control of blood sugar levels over time can help lower these risks. More from VOA's Carol Pearson.
Ralph Deneen was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes more than 30 years ago. He wears an insulin pump and tests his blood sugar 5 times a day.
When I became diabetic, it was a very confusing moment in my life. I was about 30 years old, and it came out of nowhere at me.
Deneen participated in a study that lasted 7 years, starting in the mid-1980s. Half the participants, including Deneen, were instructed on how to maintain tight control of their blood sugar. The other half controlled their sugar more loosely. A new study looked at the data to determine whether this intensive blood sugar control would help reduce long-term complications of the disease like vision loss, kidney failure, nerve damage, and heart disease. Dr. David Nathan at Massachusetts General Hospital led the study.
Tighter blood sugar control reduced those complications by as much as 60 to 70%.
The researchers continued to follow 99% of these participants after the study ended in 1993. They wanted to see whether maintaining tighter blood sugar control early on would result in a longer lifespan.
And it turns out that although the entire group is doing quite well, including those who were originally on conventional therapy, those with intensive therapy have a reduction in mortality by about 33%. There's no thickening of the lens, so there are no cataracts developing, which is great. People with type 1 diabetes are not only doing better if they have intensive therapy, but that their lifespan is probably approximating that in the non-diabetic population.
Researchers are now trying to identify genetic and environmental causes of the disease and to see if they can get cells to produce insulin. The study was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association. Carol Pearson, VOA News.
Well, the relationship between police and African Americans is tense in some U.S. communities. Well, the problem received global attention last year after a series of confrontations and controversial shootings involving police and young black men. But some police departments are working to bring the communities together in our continuing series to protect and serve. Mike O'Sullivan reports some Los Angeles community leaders say the effort is helping in one neighborhood with a troubled history.
Commander,
Captain Philip Tingarides is responding to a call of a woman assaulted by her boyfriend. The information is sketchy, but police locate the site, question the victim, and later apprehend the suspect. Just days ago, a young man was shot and killed after a confrontation with gang members nearby. The hole from a bullet strike can still be seen.
Somebody came in here from that gang and just arbitrarily started shooting people.
Candles mark a street-side memorial for one of 2 women recently murdered. It happened around the corner from a road grimly called Death Alley. Violent crime in Los Angeles is up for the first time in a decade, but the murder rate has dropped dramatically over the decades, partly because of outreach by police. Officers in this station mentor kids and coach their football teams.
It gave our officers who really only responded to bad situations where we get called and they see the worst part of people at their worst moment, to see a different side of the community.
These streets know violence. The Watts riots of 1965 and again in 1992, both in protest over treatment of black men by police. Today, a weekly meeting of the Watts Gang Task Force brings together local leaders and police for dialogue. Special police units patrol the public housing projects as part of a community safety partnership. The coordinator is Imada Tingarides. She is well known here, a police sergeant and wife of Captain Tingarides. She says things have gotten better in her 20 years with the department.
There were times when you could only go into the public housing developments with a minimum of 4 officers because officers were shot at. We were constantly going back and forth violently with the community.
Residents have to help. People like Cynthia Mendenhall, a gang member in her youth. She lost 2 sons to the violence.
If you don't have people like us in place and all over the United States, New York, Chicago, Detroit, wherever these police shootings, in front of the people, in between the police department, it will never work.
In August, the shooting of a young black man by police angered people here, but most refused to turn to violence. Activists like Perry Crouch of the Watts Gang Task Force look to civil rights leader Martin Luther King for inspiration.
That wasn't his dream. His dream was to snatch down the walls of racism and prejudice, and we all bond together as God's children.
He says the dream has not been realized in South Los Angeles, but through dialogue, the goal is getting closer. Mike O'Sullivan, VOA News, Los Angeles.
Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, we are the robots. A little army busts a move in Tokyo. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines.
In Zambia, voters cast their ballot in an election to replace late President Michael Sata, who died in October of last year. In Nigeria, residents living in Boko Haram-controlled territories suffer hunger, killings, and economic shutdown. In the DRC, 3 people are killed in Kinshasa on Monday during a protest against President Kabila's move to extend his hold on power. Finally, in Egypt, the Suez Canal authorities invite investors to take part in the building of a new canal.
That's it for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. Here's a word you don't often use to describe Versace. That's cozy. Donatella Versace's collection for men had an unapologetic, warm and cuddly core with cashmere knitwear in long, lean rib tops, fitted neat leggings or bulky neat cardigans. And the revolution didn't stop there. The new Versace jacket closed in one variation on one side with a plain horizontal clasp. The simplicity carried through to the colors, monotones in smoky urban tones of gray, burgundy and brown. Leather sneakers finished the looks. Now, staying on the runway, Gucci's collection appears to be a tribute to French artists, intellectuals and revolutionaries. The hues of red, white and blue, the colors of the French flag, contributed to the sense of Je suis Charlie camaraderie that was prevalent in many cities around the world. Many of the outfits suggested characters from France's rich cultural history. A white shirt with a dark ribbon tied in a bow around the neck was reminiscent of a French school uniform. Other outfits suggested the garb of a poet or an artist setting up his easel in a Parisian park. Well, and finally, robots are always trending in Japan. You are watching 100 humanoid robots performing a synchronized dance routine in Tokyo. Each of the 100 Robi robots weighs just 1 kilogram and stands 35 centimeters tall. The synchronized dance lasted 3 minutes and went off without a hitch. The 100 Robi project was the brainchild of their designer of Tokyo University. Each Robi's robot cost around $1,500, not a bad price for such a lively company. And that is what is trending. Now, the African Cup of Nations is underway after a controversial build-up to the 30th edition, which included a hasty late switch of hosts to Equatorial Guinea in a wake of concerns over the Ebola virus. 16 nations again line up for the biannual Continental Championship, seeking Africa's top sporting prize at the tournament, which started on Saturday and finishes on February the 8th. For more, we are joined via Skype by VOA's Abdul Shakur Aboud from Malabo in Equatorial Guinea. Now, Shakur, very quickly, tell us exactly some of the challenges that people have been facing as they try to enjoy these games.
Well, one of the major challenges is infrastructure. The other thing is that the games are played between different cities, mainly because when you have Malabo is on an island, you have to fly over to Bata, where I am, and the challenge is to go to the different cities. Going to the other cities, there is a lot of security every village you go. So a trip which is 1 hour is taking people 3 hours. That's a big challenge. The other challenge is internet. The internet is very, very slow. So with a lot of people around here, we're having a hard time to file. We're having a hard time sending stories. So those are the major challenges. And then another major challenge is the question of lodging. In Bata, the hotels are not enough or to the standard. In Malabo, where only the Group D is playing, there is enough hotels, but there's no people there. And another major challenge which we came to learn is that Equatorial Guinea has refused visa from a lot of African, not supporters, but officials of different countries. I learned that yesterday a delegation of 20 people from Cameroon were refused a visa to come here. So there is a lot of those issues taking place. But what the people or the authorities of CAF are saying is that we should say thanks God that Equatorial Guinea has shown up in 50 days to come up with a match and to put up this tournament, and the football games are going on, and we are seeing tremendous football. So everybody should enjoy.
All right. Well, we are thankful that we managed to at least get through with that Skype.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Shakur. And that's a viewer's Swahili service reporter, Abdul Shakur Aboud, reporting live via Skype from Malabo in Equatorial Guinea. And that's our show for today. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us here in Washington, I want to thank you. Have a good night.
Every song has a different meaning to each person that hears it and interprets it differently. Border Crossings is unique in that it lets the listeners decide what we're playing. We bring in guests so that our audience has access to some of the biggest names in pop music today, and we reach out to the audience each and every day in different ways.
We are able to touch on things that are important to people on an everyday basis. Hello and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. In a lively half hour, news, sports, health, lifestyle information, comments from our viewers. Africa 54, the best for Africa, about Africa. Join us only on VOA.